Today's video is supported by Cardo. Thanks to them for keeping us connected while we ride and film.
Look at all these super cool motorcycles here. You got your fancy Ducati, your limited MV Agusta, and the elegant Triumph Daytona here. These brands are working so hard to make you excited about what they're doing. However, there is one brand out there that doesn't seem to care. How does Honda, the company that makes the only factory chopper, they released the RC213V, the MotoGP bike for the street, and they make the Grom, which is about the stupidest motorcycle out there. How do they get a reputation for being so dang boring? Let's find out today on this episode of the Beginner Bike Giveaway Series. Alright guys, before we get too far into this one, I do want to point out that we are going to be making fun of Honda a little bit. We are going to be pointing out some of their flaws, but that does not mean that they make bad motorcycles. And if you own a Honda, please don't interpret me saying that Honda is bad as you own a bad motorcycle. I've actually owned two separate Hondas. I've ridden a whole bunch of them. They do make good motorcycles if they do have some flaws. Now let's get our hitting sticks out and start beating Honda like a rented mule. So to understand what makes Honda more boring compared to other manufacturers, I think it's important to look at what they're doing in the background. And in typical Yammie Noob style, I've assembled a list of 7 things that I wanted to talk about. And the first thing is how they've embraced DCT transmissions. So you might be sitting there asking yourself, what does DCT even mean? Well, dual clutch transmissions are basically automatic transmissions for motorcycles. You'll go into a dealership and you'll see a motorcycle that looks like a normal bike that just doesn't have a clutch. Something like the Goldwing or the Africa Twin are some of the main flagship bikes that they make that don't have actual clutch levers. But there are some lesser known motorcycles like the CTX line and the NC line, which are very utilitarian, easy twist and go motorcycles to ride. So a lot of riders out there will look at a DCT motorcycle and think they're boring because there's nothing for their left hand to do and they're not actually engaged in changing the speed of the motorcycle beyond twisting and go. Now, these bikes are actually easier to get into, but the skill ceiling is also a lot lower. You're going to encounter a point where you can't develop as a rider anymore because you're not really controlling your motorcycle. There's a reason why you don't see DCT transmission in racing. Now, you're also going to notice that there's less hoonability, a little bit less fun factor in those motorcycles because you can't clutch up a wheelie or you can't rev match those motorcycles. It does make them just a little bit more boring compared to their standard counterparts. So next up, it's worth remembering that Honda's actually a lot bigger than just their motorcycles. They sold $100 billion worth of cars worldwide in 2019 and only $20 billion worth of bikes. That's before you even get into something like their refrigerators or generators or lawnmowers or whatever else Honda makes. When they make so much other stuff, it's no wonder that when you play a word association game with a normie, they associate stuff other than motorcycles with Honda, where you don't see that with stuff like Kawasaki. Let's take a look at an example. All right, so I'm gonna say a word and I want you to say the first thing that comes to your head when I say it. Yeah, I can do that. Yamaha. Pianos. Cowie. Ninjas. Okay, Suzuki. Some dude on a Gixxer doing 186 miles an hour on the freeway in flip-flops and a tank top. Now how about Honda? Lawnmowers. Triumph? Classic bikes. Honda? Economy cars. How about Harley Davidson? Big American cruisers. Indian? Discount Harley Davidson. And then lastly, Honda. Generators. So if you play this game with a normie, it's no wonder you hear something like Civic or Lawnmower or maybe even reliability when you think of Honda. But even if you play it with a motorcyclist, you're likely to get something like the Goldwing or the Grom or maybe even the Shadow, not something like the Fireblade. And you know what? That's actually Honda's own fault. They did it by design, and that leads me perfectly into my next point. The NICE campaign. So by now you've heard the stories. Back in the 50s and 60s, Harley was really trending itself on this bad boy, rebel, counterculture image, and they'd managed to associate that with all of motorcycling. And in an effort to be different, Honda put out the Super Cub and showed that it was a motorcycle for anyone. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your daughter, your dog. Anybody could have fun on a Super Cub. In fact, the idea was that somebody who rides a Super Cub is on the nice list and could expect to see it in their Christmas stocking or under the Christmas tree. It was one of those ideas that really stuck with Honda through the latter half of the 20th century and has kind of permeated all of their motorcycles. In fact, the Honda Super Cub went on to be the most popular motorcycle ever made, full stop. They sold 100 million units by 2017, and with the new Grom, the new Monkey, and the Trail 125 scooters, they're basically getting more popular. This nice aspect permeates all the way through Honda's motorcycles, including our CBR 500R giveaway bike, which you can win by clicking the link down below and going to yammie.co. If you saw my Living With video that I put out on this recently, you'll know that it's a very docile, a very polite, very pulled together motorcycle that does exactly what you'd want it to do. It's really kind of a sport bike for mom. It's relaxed. Anybody can get on and have fun with this bike. So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the notion of perfection being boring. And I know this confuses a lot of people who are like, well, do you need your motorcycle to be worse for it to be better? That doesn't make any sense. But think about it a little bit. Why do we like the Ducati so much? Because it shakes and rattles, and it does some weird stuff that other motorcycles don't do. Makes it feel very alive. Whereas the Honda here feels a little cold, a little clinical, because everything just works exactly the way it's meant to be. It actually echoes an old Japanese Zen philosophy of being like a circle as opposed to a triangle. Now the way this works is back in the day, a samurai was meant to be like a circle. He'd clear his mind, he'd have no ego, and he would be able to work through the world, move very freely from place to place, and have no edge on which to catch. One like a triangle would have too much friction and attract too much attention, and thus he wouldn't be able to travel through the world easily. Now this motorcycle feels very similar, and I'm not sure where the hell I was going with that, but obviously we want a motorcycle that feels a little bit more personality. Go get yourself a Ducati. So as you can see, not only are the Hondas usually more expensive, but they do tend to pack a little bit less technology and a little less innovation. The CBR 1000RR is not as sophisticated as something like an R1. Now some people like that, but you know what? If you want to have your wallet drained and get less value for money, I'm sure there's a Honda salesman somewhere in your town who will happily oblige. And I can say that as a previous owner of 2 different Honda motorcycles. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to this week's episode of Which One's the Honda? You know how this one works. I'm going to give you 3 different classes of motorcycles, 4 different bikes in that class and their price. You have to pick out which one's the Honda. A, B, C, or D, put your answers down below. If you get all 3 of them right, we'll heart your comment. Maybe if we forget about it. But hey, we're going to start out with our super sports here. Now, our first entrant, A, is the R1M. It's $26,999. Next, we have the GSX-R 1000R 100th Anniversary Edition. Now, isn't that special? That bike comes in at $17,999. Then we have the CBR 1000RR SP Fireblade. A lot of words in that name. That one's $28,500. Lastly, we have D, the ZX-10R at $15,399. Pick out which one's the Honda down below. Moving on to our 650 class, we're going to start out with A, the MT-07 at $7,699. B, we have the SV650 at $74.99. Then we have the Z650. What a lovely bike. We've got it right here. It's sitting at $7,249. And D, we have the CB650R. That one comes in at $9,199. Which one's the Honda? Rounding us out today, we have the Sport Touring Marketplace. We're going to start out with A, the Hayabusa. That one right here comes in at $14,799. B, we have the Goldwing Tour, big old bike, $27,500. Next we have C, the Star Venture. That one comes in at $26,999. Finishing it out, we have D, the Concourse, $15,799. Which one's the Honda? The penultimate reason why Honda's a little bit boring is they don't really do special edition motorcycles. I mean, look at the Triumph here and the MV Agusta. These are some really attractive motorcycles, the kind of bikes that most people have as their desktop wallpaper, the kind of thing that they might see at a bike show. It's honestly kind of crazy that we have both of them sitting right here next to the Honda, but why did these special editions even matter, right? Well, they're for a brand to really cause people to get excited about what they're doing. Obviously, not every motorcycle needs to be a special edition. I mean, Triumph still makes regular motorcycles, and MV doesn't do anything regular because they're Italian. But you would like to see a little bit of a special edition touch to some of these other motorcycles in their line. It causes people to realize that not only are they excited about the motorcycles that they get from their favorite manufacturers, but their manufacturers are also excited to make these motorcycles. So it's not just the big four and Eurobike manufacturers that like to get in on the special edition party. Harley and Indian do the same things. I mean, Indian made the FTR 750, which was a flat track race only motorcycle that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars, but you can't even buy it and ride it on the street. And the whole point was to help sell the FTR 1200, which was the new hotness. Even when Harley released the V-Rod, they made a ton of special editions, all the way down to the V-Rod Destroyer, which is obviously the most metal motorcycle name ever. And that was a drag strip only version of the V-Rod. Now, Honda does have the CBR 1000 RR SP Fireblade, which is the dumbest motorcycle name ever. But that's not really a special edition. It's more of a flagship version of their CBR 1000 RR. Now, of course, you can't run out and buy one right now, but sure enough, eventually you're gonna be able to see them in dealerships nearby you. It's only a matter of time until Joe Blow gets to be able to go buy one of these motorcycles. It's almost like Honda's bashful about the motorcycles they make, and they don't really celebrate them in the same way that other manufacturers like to. So the number one reason why Honda's kind of a boring manufacturer is they just don't make stupid motorcycles anymore. I mean, look at the Hayabusa. This thing is a classic amongst Busa boys and Hayabusa men who just want to rip fat highway pulls in Florida. And then you got Kawasaki with the H2 line. Because what's better than a motorcycle with 200 horsepower? Obviously one with 240 horsepower and a supercharger. What are you, stupid? And then the MT-10 from Yamaha, which is basically an R1 with no fairings and comfortable, that rips power wheelies all the way through fourth gear and has a mid-range so savage it's like wrestling a bear that's hopped up on pre-workout and steroids. And then you got Honda. They just have the Fury, and any self-respecting chopper boy knows that you gotta get yourself a Mad Dog Bulldog Freedom Rod from Craigslist for $40,000. I mean, come on. It didn't used to be this way. Back in the day, Honda made the RC213V, except it was a street motorcycle with lights. I mean, you could literally ride around on a GP bike. They made the RC211V that had a V5 motor in it. They had the oval piston NR750, and they had the CB900C that had an output shaft on the wrong side and a shaft drive and like 9 joints to get power down to the wheel. I mean, where's that Honda? It really does suck to see a manufacturer that's so uptight and so risk averse, especially when motorcycles are meant to be fun. I'd like to see a little bit more variety in my Hondas, and unfortunately they just aren't there.
You've made it to the end of a Yammie Noob video. Did you like what you saw? Do you want to see more of it? Check it out, right here, just like magic, waiting for you. Click this little square right here, more memes, more Yammie, more of my face. Isn't that great?